Alright, people. Alright.
Gratitude.
Right, Salamullahi alaikum. Let's see. Wenja. I'm not sure what that is. What's a Wenja? Right. My drink ain't healthy. Life ain't healthy. My drink is the least of my issues. What does he say? دعنك اللوم فإن اللوم إغراء وداوني بالتي كانت هي الداء. That's what he says about drinking, Abu Nawas. Huh? कब तक जियोगे? कब तक पियोगे? That's the thing. My drink is all right. Right, let's إن الحمد لله وكفاه والصلاة والسلام على رسوله المصطفى وعلى عباده الذين ارتضى ومن بهداهم اهتدى وبآثار أهل المدينة اقتفى وبعد فسلام الله عليكم ورحمته تعالى وبركاته. Shukran, Ustad Ibrahim, shukran, much appreciated. Shaolay, alright, Shaolay, I'm not sure what that is. Right, did somebody ask me a question about football? I've got no idea. I do not watch any sports. I could for some reason just never, excluding wrestling of course as a kid. I was an absolute die-hard fan of WWF back in the days. Right, but other than that I could never understand the fascination in just watching people run after a football or run after a ball. I can understand maybe the wisdom in playing games, but I could never understand how people become kind of entranced by watching that. I just couldn't, on a personal basis I can't relate to it, so weird I am, what can I say. Right, well people, let's see what questions we've already got firing in. Right, I've got no idea people. Football thing, you can't ask me who should stay, who should leave. It makes no sense to me. So you can use the table if you want. Right, that's alright, so let me see if any questions. Discuss these two issues. What are the stages before the Neanderthal man, and can we as Muslims accept the narratives that apes, bonobos were the original species from which human Siraj? That is not what evolution actually states. It doesn't actually say we emanated from bonobo apes. Okay, so I'm just trying to log into some of the questions that have already been said on my status. So where are we? Right, as you can see today, by the way, I didn't even bother today with the time. I was like, I'm just in my own world. I can't really get into all of this. Right, so this evolution question, before moving on. Evolution, people, is a fact. Okay. Denying evolution is just silly. Alright, the thing is, what we can speak about is that, okay, we as Muslims believe that Adam alayhi salam was a miracle, like he had some miraculous touch to him, and therefore he may not have been born of womb, but in terms of him as a kind of genus, he followed on as part of a genus. Do you understand? So the way, for example, Isa alayhi salam, we as Muslims would say, was not born of a man, yet he was a man and resembled men, if you understand what I'm saying. He absolutely was a man 100% and resembled men 100%, just like all other men, even though there was a man missing before he was born. In a similar way, Adam alayhi salam, those kind of if we're going to take the miracle angle of, say, he was somehow miraculous, he was still in line with what was the Homo species, okay, except he would have been a miraculous kind of a dynamic turn for the human species. So before him there were other humans meaning Homo, so the Homo species. Somebody's mentioned Neanderthal. Obviously, Homo sapiens didn't evolve from Neanderthals anyway, as you're probably aware of that. They say that Neanderthals and Homo sapiens, and maybe even Denisovan, actually Denisovan man, they say, had an earlier kind of break-off, but these two, they feel, may have been both at some point broke off from Homo heidelbergensis is the one that they feel, Neanderthal and Homo sapien. Sapien means wise. Okay, that's what it means, is that this was a human, and Homo means human. So these were all humans, if you consider them, and in Arabic we would say they were all bashar. Okay, and we believe Adam to have been the first insan. So we don't believe these other bashar were insan, but they were all bashar, and Adam was bashar, except insan is unique to Bani Adam. Okay, so that's how it is. And Neanderthals, I mean, I'm not sure why the question was unique to Neanderthals, but Neanderthals are a unique species. They were more sophisticated than people think they were. So people have this image of them as being very kind of just like almost like these kind of ape men. And now anthropological discoveries show that's not the case. They would have most likely had language. Maybe not as sophisticated as our language. I don't think it would have been as sophisticated as modern human language, but they would have had some language. They all, by the way, they all knew things like fire, how to work with fire and stuff like this. Fire has actually been around for almost, just under perhaps 2 million years. Considering modern man has only been around, anything between 100 to 150,000 years. Fire having been around for almost under 2 million years, with Homo ergaster and Homo erectus and all these other kind of, they've all had fire. So Neanderthal man was generally he would have been more, you've all seen the kind of images, perhaps more, they say slightly shorter than modern man. On average, I think they give the description of Neanderthals being around maybe about 5'6", but much stockier, much more stronger than modern man. In some of the documentaries, they give a description of them being I mean, I don't know why they draw this parallel, but they say they would have bench pressed anything between 150 to 200 kilos. That's what Neanderthal, if they were in the gym, which, so I don't know why they give that, but I've seen that in some of the kind of documentaries. But they would have been very strong, very, and even their tools were very, their tools when tested today were actually better than modern human tools. And so modern humans use things like bamboo and other things as well. They used other kind of things as knives as well, and part of their throwing, you know, the kind of, whether they would have become arrows or spears and stuff like this. But the Neanderthal, they used a particular, they used particular kind of stone, which one was very hard to craft in that particular way, and two, it was actually much more enhanced and sharper than modern man. And so nowadays they've replicated experiments where they'll cut leather, and they'll see that with the modern man tools you'd have to kind of keep hacking, but with the Neanderthal kind of tools you just slice right through it. They also show that Neanderthals had some very primitive form of surgery going on, because they show certain bones that have been healed and replaced and stuff like this, and now they feel they've even discovered what may have been a ceremonial site, so they may have had some form of ceremonies, but it would have been very primitive. Okay, there is now overwhelming evidence that they mated with modern man. But obviously it was a small amount, and it's been diluted out over the time. And I think the last Neanderthals were probably around 35,000 years ago, something like that, which isn't actually such a long time ago when you think about it. And so it's unique that since this last ice age we are the only humans to have continued. Otherwise, for thousands and thousands of years we all kind of shared this habitat, the globe. But we are, and really human beings, since this last ice age, everything has really happened. I mean, agriculture arrives on the scene, changes everything. Agriculture is only about 9,000 years old. In fact, all wheat on earth can trace its DNA just to Asia Minor, and they can actually trace where it came from. So prior to that, nobody knew agriculture. They all, you know, so the point is that humans have really kind of gone through these shifts. But what makes us unique, in my understanding, is, as Allah says in the Quran, وَلَقَدْ نَفَخْنَا فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِنَا, this spirit of God that has been given to insan. And I don't think, although, you know, Allah says we kind of blew into him our spirit, I don't, in my understanding, that's not a physical, it's not talking about physical, the spirit of God, but it's talking about the capacity, what it rendered insan into. It turned modern humans into something just amazing, seriously. And it's interesting that it's interesting actually, these topics, because we're getting to a stage now where we, you know, by looking into DNA and looking into genes, we can now potentially control certain things. So that is very interesting, because the question, like if I was to put a question out there, that for example, what is one of the, if we were to say one of our extreme purposes, let's say one of our purposes in this world was to be happy, then we now know how happiness works, right? You can only, so for example, all happiness out there, all happiness has a floor and ceiling effect with the kind of serotonin levels we have in our brain. Okay, so some people, so for example, serotonin, you're going to say dopamine and oxytocin, these neurotransmitters in the brain will work miracles on on people being happy. But there will always be just a ceiling effect. You can never get more happier than that ceiling effect. Because that's how these kind of transmitters, or, you only have a certain capacity as a human being. So it is interesting when we think, what is going on, that we can now manipulate certain things. I was listening to this one study about, certain rodents that were being kind of explored, and they were like similar to mice. They're incredibly promiscuous, always have multiple mating partners, but they found that a particular kind to be just very monogamous right throughout its lifetime. And now scientists have tracked down the gene. They tracked down the gene in that creature that they feel is responsible for monogamy. So, you see, now, technically, if they could correlate these back to, let's say, human DNA, it means that they could make human beings monogamous. Okay, now they've tested that, they're testing that on these kind of creatures, but what it also means is that human beings can now completely manipulate social structures, or they may have the potential to do that. Completely. I mean, right now we have an evolutionary kind of mindset. So male creatures think in a particular way, female creatures think in a particular way, or behave in a particular way, and this is part of our evolutionary kind of fitrah, who we are as creatures, as human creatures. Now, to think that humans are now embarking at a stage in life where we can manipulate all of that potentially. I mean, the question is, would you want to live in a world like that? That's the question. I mean, on one hand it's terrifying, on one hand it's incredibly exciting to see the kind of discoveries that people are making. And it's interesting because there's a book written in the early, I think it was in 1930, there was a book written by an author, Huxley. It's called The Brave New World. But it's a novel, but in this novel it's about the future. It's kind of a counterpart to Orwell's 1984, because Orwell is speaking about this whole dictatorship where, you have that kind of big brother is always looking down at you, he's always watching everything, it's totalitarianism. But in Huxley's Brave New World, people kind of have these drugs and everything, and this consumerism that they're so bought into that they don't want change, that there are no wars in his world, there are no, there's no illnesses, and everybody's just, the people work, they're laborers, they're whatever, and they're just happy. They're always just happy. They take they take drugs, they take different things, they're kind of brainwashed into this consumerism of they buy all these things that they feel will make them happy, but they are just so content with this that they do not want to challenge anything. Now this novel also had people incredibly worried, it bothered people that by just taking a drug or by doing things that you would just be in this content state of mind. And it's amazing because we are in some ways in a society where, because all these things, technically consumerism and everything, it's very new. And I mean, I'm not trying to, unlike some people who just condemn all these things, I'm not necessarily condemning, but what I'm doing is just putting a question mark, an introspective question mark, where we're looking into ourselves and thinking, whoa, wow, like what has become of this world, and where have human beings got to in such a short span of time? And now we have this whole society where, you know, we'll buy stuff, but we're all a part of it. And you see, if you're going to say, well, are we better off without it? I mean, maybe we're not better off without it. I'm not saying we are better off without it. I'm just saying it's incredibly puzzling, that's all, where we are. That's all. Well, let's move on to a different question, shall we? Why can't a child of zina inherit? Okay, Bushra, I'm not sure what that means, because that can have many ramifications to it. Okay, I think you can inherit even from traditional fiqh based on different circumstances. What does zina mean? So for example, zina here could mean nikah shubha, the nikah that's taken place with some doubts, nikah fasid. It could include, as in the Hanafi fiqh, Imam Abu Hanifa and other people had said, if a person had committed zina but then marries the person to keep satar, to keep kind of, in these circumstances they would inherit. And even in classical fiqh they do inherit in these circumstances. So I'm not sure what you mean. This could mean, for example, somebody you've had no contact with, they turn up 35 years later, they say, hey, I'm your child. Okay, now that's, you can imagine, okay, today we could maybe say DNA, but historically you can imagine how that would cause complexities in, you know, people believing that. What are the other motives? Can you please does something about perennial? I don't know what perennial is, so no idea. If the hijab is here to protect women from being lustfully stared at by men, as some argue, why were slave women not required to cover up? You see, I totally agree with you, Abdul. This is a very good question. These kind of questions cut to the heart of really of intellectual religiosity, of trying to tackle things objectively. Because I personally, to start off with, I personally do believe that servant slave women in the past, although this is now an obsolete question, but I do believe that they would have had the same requirements as normal women. Okay, I do not believe that they would have been told that it's okay, you can go around topless and do all of this and do all of that. I don't personally believe that. This, what I'm saying, is the view of certain scholars that have argued this throughout the, centuries, including people like Ibn Hazm and other people who, and that is what I find myself in line with. So I do believe that. Okay. Now, that said, I understand that most people disagree with me. So most people feel that slave women do not need to cover up. And they don't need to cover their breasts, they do not need to cover their, and it's weird really, because they say they need to cover their knees to the navel. I mean, I get the thighs, but I mean, I would have thought people, I would have thought what would have been more sexualized was if we're speaking about their breasts as opposed to speaking about their thighs. But I mean, for some reason, that's the angle that most people have taken. I disagree with that strongly, but most people today would argue in defense of that reasoning, and I think it's nonsensical. I also think it's hypocritical. That how can you defend that on one hand and then argue that women need to cover their faces and do this and do that, and because this is fitna? I mean, what kind of nonsense is that? I mean, in all honesty, if a guy is interested in a woman for outright just simple instinctual gratification, sexual gratification, then it doesn't matter if she's a slave or a free woman or whatever. That doesn't make a difference, right? So to say, well, you know what, I was going to do something haram now, but then I just realized, you're a slave. So, it doesn't quite have that kick in anymore. So I don't think that's how men or males function. I don't think that's how they function. And I definitely don't think that's how they functioned historically. So, although today this has become a bit more of a theoretical debate, but I agree with you that it shows the double standards that are present then in religious discourse. And this is why I have always been against institutionalization, the institutionalization of things, including the institutionalization of religion. Because I believe, obviously, like all religions, Islam too, along the centuries, has been institutionalized. It did become along the way about empire, about control, about things like that. And you see that in the fatwa. Even this fatwa of saying slave women are not allowed to cover the thing was just an attempt to control and distinguish between slaves, and it was about maintaining control. Institutionalization, whenever takes a veneer of religion, it never has khair in it. Right? Allah says in the Quran, إِنَّ الْمُلُوكَ إِذَا دَخَلُوا قَرْيَةً أَفْسَدُوهَا وَكَذَلِكَ يَفْعَلُونَ. That these kings, these rulers, when they enter a place, they will only spread corruption there. And that is how they certainly do. That is exactly what they do. So when you have religion, institutionalization enters religion and takes control, there is only fasad. And even if it has a religious veneer to it, I mean, it's not, I don't like it anyway, I've never, and this is, and these things show the double standards that we have. If we're going to defend this statement on one hand, and then on the other hand we're going to say, well, women need to be all covered up, and this can't be revealing, and that can't be revealing, and you see, because then there's some serious double standards going on. On one hand, you're arguing and your books are defending making women naked, almost, or saying they can be naked, saying they can be like this, saying they can, and on the other hand you're trying to embody things like this high ground, moral high ground of modesty, and it doesn't fit. It just does not fit. So on one hand it's okay. This is why I said to some of these people, I said, you defend in your books, on one hand it's okay to rape slave women, it's okay to do this, it's okay to do that, and on the other hand you have this puritanist high ground in saying some of these things, I've got, one must be above certain, you act so puritanic and so, desires and control desires and do this and do that. But tell me, you could have had that same approach with these rulings. And yet with those rulings, that's not what you say. And that's not what you defend. And this isn't even about, whether this is practical today, because people would say, yeah, well, that's theoretical. Okay, it is to a large extent, although nutcases like ISIS are trying to implement it. But then, even if it is theoretical, it's what you believe. So you believe it's okay to be like that. You believe that's okay for people. And remember, these slaves, a lot of them that were slaves were not just... They were also people that were just kidnapped and sold as slaves. They weren't just, people think, this is like, they were from all over the world. And if you read history, slaves weren't just always people that were taken from war, that were your kind of prisoners of war. They were people who were kidnapped. So if you read Sahih Bukhari, for example, some of the companions, when they were out, they were going somewhere, they got kidnapped and sold off as slaves. And you'll get that this was always going on. People, if they saw a soft target, a small caravan going, they looted the caravan, and they would just take some of the people and sell them off in a market as slaves. And that's it. A person's welcome to the life of slavery. So it wasn't really a... So what I'm trying to say is, all of a sudden now, right, it's okay to do all these things, and it's okay that you don't need to cover, or you don't need to do this. So what I'm trying to say is, look, certain parts, certain narratives need to be revisited, okay, in Islam, okay. They need to be kind of revisited. We need to kind of explore and understand that it's just because certain people allowed them in the books in their time doesn't mean they're necessarily accurate positions in Islam. Right, what, Salam Mufti Abu Layth, what can you do if one suffers from a skin disease and doing wudu hurts? Then, right, almost had a catastrophe right here. Right, चल ले लो उसको रख दो ठीक है ओके वो भी गिरेगा हाँ ठीक है. Right, so this one's not as bad as the other one, who's an absolute nightmare. Go on then. Alright, so this one's the one who I found out who had popped in and said, "Hi everyone, don't tell my dad." ठीक है, बोलो अस्सलाम वालेकुम. नहीं बोलना है. Say no salam.
Assalamu alaikum.
Okay, go on, off you go. जाओ, सो जाओ. चल दरवाजा बंद कर दो. Right, so if you have a skin condition, you can just do tayammum. That's absolutely fine. Okay. Right, and I did highlight in last week's session that tayammum is a lot more acceptable by some schools than it is by others. Like the Maliki madhab is a lot more comfortable using tayammum in many things. Can you explain the hadith about Ummah will be divided into 73 sects? Okay. Right, the thing is, this hadith, some people first of all did not consider this authentic at all, including people like Ibn Hazm, who said that this hadith was, I believe he said was fabricated, and people like Ibn al-Wazir, who considered it very weak. And the thing is, I'm not sure if I personally buy into this hadith. If I do, it is simply at the level that the Prophet ﷺ was simply trying to explain to people that, look, that the way the Jews and Christians went off ruining the religion, Muslims will do the same. So this was simply, so if it is authentic, my understanding of it is that it's just figurative. Okay, it's not that the Prophet was really counting, like, 70, there'll be 71, be 72, like that. You see, the Arabs used the term 70 for many. Right, and that's common, that people, this is a known thing, by the way, I'm not just saying that, this is well known, that the Arabs used to do that. So the thing is that even in the Quran, when it comes about do not seek forgiveness for them, for the hypocrites, and even if you did this 70 marra, 70 times, Allah will not forgive them. 70 here didn't mean that, if you do it just 70 and then stop. But 70 is used by the Arabs commonly to mean the way we say in English, like we have set numbers. Okay, we'll say 100, or like people say 1,000,000. I've done this hundreds and millions of times. These are words that people resort to, numbers they resort to. So in every language that exists, so in English as well, like people will often say like 2. So for example, give me 2 seconds, or they say give me 2 minutes. Like they don't use. I'm just giving. They won't usually say, hey, give me 4 seconds. Somebody might say that, but that's not the common kind of phrase. People will just say, hey, just give me 2. Hold on for 2 seconds, will you? So 2 has become a common thing that is used. So the Arabic language is no different. It's the same kind of thing, right? So in my understanding, that's not what it meant about, so the Salafis, for example, will be the group that go to Jannah, and everybody else gets to go to hell. I know some of them refer to themselves as Firqatun Najiyah. There's going to be some disappointment then. Some people refer to themselves as we are the saved sect. Mate, you haven't even been saved from autism. Right, so the thing is, I think, look, I tell you, if you want to understand why that isn't true. You see, today we think religion is, faith is creed. Faith is not creed. Okay, creed is a product that has been invented by Muslims to help Muslims. Part of it was to help Muslims, part of it may have been institutionalization of the religion. So they kind of numbered out what you ought to believe. So you are only a Muslim if you believe in these 66 things, or these 67 things, or these 105 things, or now you are only a Muslim. Obviously the Prophet never taught Islam like that. Neither did his companions, neither did their students, neither did their students. This emerges later. True, I accept that it is partially to help Muslims know what it is that they do believe as opposed to they don't. And part of it was institutionalization to control people and regulate them and not allow free thought. Because if you now start to think differently, you are out of this box. And therefore you will be condemned. So, is this how the companions or how the fitrah of Islam is? Well, it isn't, because when you look at the Prophet ﷺ saying in a hadith, and I'd like to share this hadith with you, it's a very popular hadith, brought by Imam Nawawi in his 40 hadith, and in several other books of hadith, that the Prophet said that there was a person, and he gives the example of this guy who gathers his children, and he says that, look, he's on his deathbed, and he says that, look, I spent all my life violating the commandments of Allah. And I don't think Allah is going to be pleased with me. So after I die, I'd like you to cremate me and scatter my ashes in different parts, different regions. So basically, I don't want an afterlife. Alright, so if you bury me, then Allah will resurrect me, so I want you to do it this way. And in the hadith, the Prophet says, Allah then commanded these ashes, and obviously they formed him in the afterlife. So that's not going on here, people can't see it. But in the other dimension, he kind of comes together. In that dimension, Allah asks him that, what made you do this? And he says, I was afraid of you. And Allah says, well, whoa, a lot of questions here. See, my screen seems to have right, so the thing is, so he says, I was afraid of you, and Allah says, well, in that case, enter paradise, and that you are forgiven. Now, I want us to reflect and analyze what's actually happened here. What was the aqeedah of this person? His aqeedah was that when he was plotting this scheme, that Allah wasn't all knowledgeable, because obviously Allah doesn't know what he's plotting. His aqeedah was that Allah wasn't watching him, because obviously if he was watching him, then this would be useless. That Allah wasn't listening to him, that Allah was incapable of collecting him together, that you can escape an afterlife. Now look how twisted this person's aqeedah is. Yet he gains entrance to paradise. So that is to show you that aqeedah really, we seem to confuse this with faith. Faith is what Islam has told us, Allah has told us to have. Aqeedah is what kind of scholars have come up with to kind of, and it's multifaceted. Part of it has been to help Muslims, part of it has been to control Muslims. I mean, I'm not saying it's bad, but I'm saying part of it, you need to recognize it for what it is. Its functionality, right? It's not something Allah said in the Quran. So this 73 sects thing is the same thing. Oh, if you subscribe to Creed A, then you are doomed. If you subscribe to Creed B, C, D, then you're still doomed. But if you happen to subscribe to Creed E, then you have been successful. So the thing is, now, so that's not Islam. Okay, that's not Islam. That's wishful thinking, really. Okay, now, Aisha Rashid Shah. Aisha is so adamant on this question of hijab and covering the hair. Right, the thing is, you see, look, must you just want me to be, have you not seen the refutations that come out against me? I mean, have you not seen that, Biff? I mean, are you not aware of my haters? I mean, seriously, must you ask, is covering the hair, wearing the hijab, fard, stroke, sunnah? What is it, goddammit? I mean, why do you hate me that much? Please! Humko bakhsh do. The thing is, right? I mean, what? Let me be, because people, I've got enough haters as it is, and right, so the general position, as I have explained, the general position according to ulama is that hijab is fard. When I say by hijab, your question covering the hair is fard. That's the general position, and there is a minority difference of opinion that have felt that hijab was not fard. Maybe it was what perfected the kind of covering, if you like. So I know Ibn Ashur mentions that in his tafsir, but he doesn't highlight who he's speaking about. I did say I felt that was a smoking gun. My research, and I explained that in a previous video, you can see my kind of research into that. Today people, there are a few scholars today, Sheikh Khalid Abul Fadl, Sheikh Javed Ghamidi, and there's about, I think there was an article I read at about 5 scholars or so who have said it is not, that they feel it's just, you know, the main thing is modesty. That's the kind of the fringe minority view you have. The majority view is that it is an obligation. Right now I'll just say that, and that's fine. I will say that, look, if you can do hijab, it's, you know, it's awesome. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will obviously reward you for that. If you can't, you can't. You know, I mean, it's not, nobody's here to judge you. I definitely am not that person that can judge you. So, and neither is anybody else. If they claim to be in a position to judge you, they're just lying. So that's not true. So I hope that's given some response. Okay, I don't think seriously it's, you know, majority of the Muslim world, the outright majority of the Muslim world, right? So all Muslims that this applies to today, possibly women and over, let's say, a certain age. Now, I would say, as far as the actual hijab is concerned, that really only a minority Muslims worldwide actually perform it the way it's like that. I mean, I think most in the Muslim world, perhaps most Muslim women do observe some kind of modesty, and so they'll cover up and they'll do things. So if it's in the Indo-Pak world, they'll have a kind of, you know, dupatta, and they'll cover it over here, or sometimes cover their head with it, but it won't be the perfect kind of hijab. That's probably most of the world today. And then there are a considerable number of women that are wearing it as well, and that's their struggle, and it's, you know, immensely rewardable. But I just don't feel we're here in a position to really pick on women, or to kind of say, you know, why are you not wearing hijab? Why are you? And I completely abhor that, you know, this example of the lollipop. And I could not stop laughing at that joke of, you know, it said the greatest plot twist in Islamic history, where you had this lollipop in a wrapper and the ants were inside. But I think it's ridiculous doing this kind of comparison of saying, oh, if you had a sweet, and would you want the sweet to be on the floor with ants on it, or would you want the sweet to be in a wrapper? Which one would you eat? I mean, what kind of a dumb, retarded analogy is that? I mean, women not wearing hijab are not like, I mean, what is that supposed to mean? What, she's got like men all over her, licking her up, or what is that supposed to mean? Like, what? Just because a woman doesn't have hijab, how does she become like this lollipop that's on the floor with dirt and ants all over it? And would you want to put that in your mouth? Of course I mean, that's a dumb question. That's like saying, oh, would you want to eat food before you've eaten it when it's on the plate, or once you've finished with it and it's in the toilet? I mean, what kind of a dumb example is that? I mean, so, look, if it works for, somebody said it works for simpletons, well, I'm sorry, they need to upgrade their intellectual standards, okay? Being Muslim ought to have a certain amount of intelligence that comes with it, okay? I'm not saying it doesn't work for some people, but then this is how you get thick people thinking. You know, I know, like, why do you think people can rally the cries? Why do you think racism works? Why do you think fascism works? Why do you think there's attacks against immigrants? These things are working because people are just acting like sheep. They're not thinking, right? So, I know it works. That works as well. Obviously, all these things work because some people are very basic-minded and they're just thick. And they'll just buy into anything. But that's not a justification for the process. It doesn't add any validation to it. It just means some people are stupid. Right, okay, so right, just a few quick questions. In Pakistan, I've heard Mulvi saying dua, forgive us for the sadaqah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Is that allowed? Okay, this means doing kind of tawassul, like saying go through for the sake of. It's allowed, but you don't need to do that. You can just speak to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without doing that kind of thing. I would say it's allowed. I wouldn't necessarily tell people to do it, but if they were doing it, I wouldn't condemn them either. But I think this ties into my previous discussion on why, despite it being rational, why most Muslims and most monotheists actually struggle with monotheism. Because in a weird way, we are actually, as human beings, we've become more polytheist than we are monotheist. And monotheism makes sense, like having one God. But in the real world, to most people, it doesn't make sense. Like, it doesn't give them practical value because they feel that God is too detached. The concept of one God is too detached for the common man. So they feel that why would that one God really care about us? So even this is a demonstration of that. So you're thinking, well, why would God really care about me? I know, but he'll care about his prophet, so I'll do. So it comes back to really trying to come to terms with monotheism. I feel that, look, you know, we should understand Allah says in the Quran, Ud'uni astajib lakum, that's a command, that call me, I will answer. That's a promise. Allah says, وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ. When my servant or slave asks about me, let them know I am indeed close. So I would say, look, we can speak to Allah direct. this analogy that the Christians used to give, that, oh, we're not worthy, we're too sinful, you have to go through a beloved. This is how the Christian hierarchy kind of works. I don't think Islam works like that. That's not how the Prophet taught the companion. Prophet never used to say to the Sahaba, by the way, you're too sinful, you have to go through me. But doing this is not forbidden. It's not forbidden. I mean, you can do that. But I wouldn't say that that should be your default way of praying. Right. Some people have haram stuff on their phone, like porn and things. They also have Quran apps. What do you say to that? What do I say to that? What are they doing having Quran on their phone? The thing is, look, having a Quran app on the phone is not the same as having a Quran. Okay, so what I ought to say to that is nate nate. Right. Right, so the thing is that part of the guilt? So when they switch out of one, they go, now let me read some Quran to cleanse myself. Nate nate, people, stop it. So the thing is, the Quran app is not the Quran. So it doesn't mean that like you need wudu to touch it or wudu to carry it. It's a digital kind of code which opens up as the Quran but isn't actually the Quran. So it's not like if I had the Quran in a bag, that's the actual Quran. If I had the Quran on this phone, it's not the actual Quran on my phone. Okay, so I don't think that, is something that is necessary. I mean, it may be a wrong in itself, but I don't think it's a sacrilege per se. Okay. Yep, so, right. Is the Azaan needed when praying at home, or is the Iqamah enough? The Azaan is said if you are calling somebody to prayer. If you're not calling anybody to pray, then the School of Medina says there's no need to read the Azaan. The Iqamah is sufficient. Right, okay. Let me just see, what's this? Right, my phone battery may be dying, people, but let's see. What are the best ways of getting rid of stress? Please cheer up our grumpy moods. Imam Hassan, those of you not following Imam Hassan, follow him. Imam Hassan, legend of Gloucester, man, working at grassroots levels, people. And there's another Imam Sahib, come on, right there, not Imam Sahib, but our Sheikh Sahib, the Glaswegian. Alright, it's another person to follow. So two people, inshallah. I do agree that I think a lot of people are grumpy and are kind of and I'll tell you what's more, I think that may just be a personality temperament. If it isn't, then it's very unfortunate, and if it is, it's still kind of sad. But I guess, I mean, it could be worse. It could be us. But I mean, the thing is, I'll tell you, no, what I was going to say was it is, what is problematic is when people justify the grumpiness or the morbidity by religion. So they say, oh, you shouldn't laugh. Allah doesn't want you to laugh. I mean, that is the, and you know something else as well. A lot of Muslims, unfortunately, especially from the Indo-Pak world, seem to believe in a lot of superstitions, and they believe that if you laugh, you will cry. That they feel that that your temperament will have, or the universe will balance the books. It has a way of balancing the books out. So if you laugh, then you will have to cry. Like something bad will happen. I don't mean cry as in like, ha ha ha, I'm laughing so much I start crying. But they mean something bad is going to happen to you, which is going to make you cry now. Oh. Yeah, right. tell you what, that must have been one hell of a joke, whoever started that one. But people actually believe that kind of stuff, and I think that's borderline shirk. Okay, it's like borderline kind of shirk almost. Believing in this kind of stuff, in this kind of karma. I don't believe in karma, and we should not believe in karma as Muslims. If I do something bad, that's between me and Allah. It's not that something bad will happen to me. I mean, there's some things which have natural consequences. I understand, obviously, you could, like if somebody broke into a place and the person caught them and beat them up, and you could say, well, you did something bad. And obviously, I don't mean like that. I mean unconnected events. So like somebody says, as a child, I stole this, or as this person stole this, now his council tax went up. Or his mortgage repayments kind of increased. So I think this is totally pathetic, and we don't believe in karma. Karma is not from Islam. Although what's interesting is Islamic sources can be manipulated to show karma. Karma is actually a Hindu belief. Okay, I'm Buddhist, I suppose, but Hindu. And this what goes round comes round, all this kind of stuff. It's not Islamic at all. But I do believe this, and people tie into this like being laughing all the time. And you see, the weird thing is people associate laughing all the time with either you're like mental, which, okay, it's difficult for me to argue against not being mental. But the thing is, look, they say you're either mental, look at him, he's dumb, or like he has no sense about him because he's always laughing. I'd say, trust me, that world is much better than the world you're living in, right? You'd rather be always laughing. I think, look, these moments we have in life, we should immerse ourselves during them in laughter. Okay, I'm telling you, like what? In a hadith, it mentions that that Allah laughs. Now, I don't believe Allah physically laughs, unlike some people who believe that anthropomorphically. But I believe that is to show us that Allah appreciates and likes a good, solid sense of humor. Jahan ji, ahlan wa sahlan, ahlan wa sahlan. Right, yes, please block Samira. Why? Is there something? Samira Khan, if you'd please stop constantly having just personal dialogues on this, otherwise you will be blocked. Right, let's move on to the next question. Somebody said, by the way, that people may be taking some of my statements out of context and using them. Look, if people want to take my things out of context and use them, it does not bother me. Okay, so alright, well, there seems to be a lot of there you go, people. I've blocked Samira. There was such a public vote to block Samira. I don't know why, but there you go. Who says I'm not democratic, huh? Right, so oh damn. Did I just argue against my own, my refutation of democratic truths? Right, so the thing is, how do you explain the expansion of the Islamic Empire after the Prophet ﷺ, when wars are actually just to defend yourself and not to attack? And did the Sahabah take the Hadith, fight them till they say La ilaha illallah as a justification? I always learnt that this Hadith mentions a complete different context. Right, okay. You see, Yunus, I think that's an interesting question. In Islam, is only defensive military strategies allowed? I'm not sure that it's only, in my understanding, this is my understanding, that Islam, it kind of works in a common sense kind of paradigm. So wars are not necessarily either. They're not exclusively defensive or exclusively offensive. They will more so definitely, obviously, perhaps throughout the play of events be more defensive than offensive, but it doesn't rule out either. I think it just bases it on welfare. So I think at times Muslims have preemptively declared wars, just as countries do. I don't think this is kind of so so irrational, because politics understands this, that just the way countries have an offensive strategy if required, but they won't generally just declare war, but they may occasionally have a preemptive kind of military offensive that takes place. In the same way, Muslims did the same historically. I don't see how that was, so different to what's going on in the world today. I think when they felt the welfare was that strong, they did resort to a preemptive military offensive to do that. I don't think Muslim wars in general, I think some may have been, but if we're going to be fair, but I don't think in general that they were barbaric. I think Muslims did, and that's my understanding, I think generally speaking, they kind of bound themselves to a reasonably, because you got to look at their own time, what's going on around them in the world. I think that Muslims did bind themselves to a very good ethical standard. Okay, a standard of kind of war ethics, military ethics, especially, which would have matched the kind of ethics we have similar to today. But they would have been on this, 1,000 years ago. So I think it was outstanding and remarkable for their era and things like that. They were way ahead of their time. I don't think all wars, I think it's unquestionable that there would have been some that were Muslims, just like other people, they were people, they must have committed atrocities and stuff like that. But I think in general, generally, when you're kind of like averaging it out, and generally speaking, I feel that the Muslims, like our history, isn't kind of, it isn't generally, especially over the 1200 years, etc., it isn't barbaric in its kind of conquests and stuff like that. People might say that's biased as a Muslim. I accept that, naturally there will be some biases, obviously, as a Muslim when you're reading into Muslim history, but that's what I truly do feel as well. Okay, there was a question, are we allowed to join the British Army? I feel that yes, we are. There's nothing wrong with joining the British Army. I heard a talk by a scholar saying that by joining the army you become an atheist. I don't know how that follows at all. It doesn't make any sense to me. Right, okay. There's an interesting question here about what advice would you give to somebody who has lost his iman, has lost hope, has developed an apathy. You see, I'm not sure what they would have lost the hope over. So what that means, okay, when you say they've lost hope, you mean hope in life, hope in a particular thing, hope in a career, hope in marriage, hope in, I don't know, or have they lost hope in God, or they've lost hope in religion, or they've lost hope in, I'm not sure, because there could be so many permutations to that question depending on what they've lost hope in. But apathy, where people start to become disinterested in religion, they become indifferent to it. You see, what I would say is, look, first of all, don't kind of allow yourself to become crushed by a sense of guilt. Okay, don't do that. Hope in general regard spread across. Right, so I think, look, Allah is there for everybody. He's there for the the extremely pious person. He's there for the negligent person. He's there for, Allah says, وَمَا مِن دَابَّةٍ فِي الْأَرْضِ إِلَّا عَلَى اللَّهِ رِزْقُهَا. So Allah, there is no creature on earth except Allah is sustaining it. And we are above just simple creatures at the end of the day. Don't think sometimes your connection, sometimes pondering just over mortality, pondering over this life, pondering over the meaning in itself is an ibadah. Okay. These things in themselves, pondering over ultimate kind of questions, just sometimes just being grateful in your heart, thinking, you know, wow, like Allah has given me so much. That is an ibadah. Like, these things connect us to God. Giving a charity, bringing a smile to somebody's face. Right, so the thing is, these things are a connection with Allah. Making dua. Do not feel that you are only a good Muslim if you're attending the masjid. That's not necessarily true. You know, just because you're not praying 5 times in a masjid, just try to work on your prayer. Sustain your prayer. If you're not praying 5 times a day, start praying 5 times a day. Even if you have to pray all 5 prayers together at once before you go to sleep, then just do that. Just pray the fard only before you go to sleep. Soon, time will come that you'll start, you know, praying maybe the morning one when you wake up, and then the afternoon one in the afternoon. And before you know it, you will be praying the salah. Allah says, وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ. Like, hold on to the rope of Allah. That is the rope of Allah. The Prophet said in a hadith, الدعاء مخ العبادة, that if you want to know the true kind of nectar, the inner, the kind of pulp of worship, he said that is dua. Because when you're making dua, it's real. You see, everything else is just a ritual. See, when I'm praying, I'm just going, oh. Okay, I'm not making those faces. But you know, you're just thinking about something. Oh, that was a good movie. Oh, I wonder what's going to happen in the next season. Look, this is everybody. No point. Look, let's not act pious. It's everybody. Right? So the thing is, but when you're making dua, it got real. That's when it gets real. Because at dua time, it's not a ritual. Because now you're in need. You see, that's when you really test somebody. Allah. बनाकर भेस हम फकीरों का गालिब तमाशाए अहले करम देखते हैं. That's what Ghalib says. He says that by disguising as those in needy, that's when we see what the generous are truly about. Okay? Because when you're in need, that's when you are, so now you're real, you're kind of asking Allah for this, for that. So make dua, that's what I would say. And just cheer up about things. Sometimes being positive is enough. Because when you're positive, you're happy. And happiness brings more happiness. And then you start to want to be grateful for that happiness. You start thinking, you know what, I'm loving this. Thinking, yeah, this is awesome. And then you're thinking, Lillahi alhamd. No praise be to Allah. You know, he's you know, you're saying that he gave me all this. So the point is that, so sometimes just try being a bit more happy, that's all. Okay? Let's move on to, there was a question there about futuhat that I saw go past. I didn't fully get that. Did I consider the futuhat to be legitimate? Do you mean the futuhat of the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahabah? Is that what you mean? Because I do consider them to be legitimate, yes. Okay, if that's your question, then of course I do. Right. I've asked the same question you didn't answer last week. I had a stillbirth, just wanted to know, do you have a janaza for a stillbirth? I never really got a clear answer. Right, okay. And also I'm learning a lot from your Q&A. Well, shukran, barakallahu feek, Salma Khan. The thing is, a stillbirth, there is a difference of opinion amongst the scholars, according to the school of Medina, that a child has to be born alive, and by alive they say yastahillu sarikhan, that he cries or she cries, that the baby cries, and that is the sign of life. Because some just simple movements, right, he should act in Batman as the Joker. Okay, thank you, Wahida. Ram Ramlal ji. Bahut dhanyavad. The thing is now, the point is that you see, it's such a serious question, and you got me laughing. So I apologize, Salma, if that came across in any way insensitive. You see, I get distracted very easily, as you can see. But the thing is that according to the Maliki Madhab, life is not just movements, because muscles can kind of be triggered through spasms being released and stuff like this. It doesn't mean somebody's alive. This is why you get corpse having movements. So those of you, I mean, sometimes dead bodies can move. Okay, it doesn't mean they're alive. And the fuqaha have spoken about this. They call this al-hayatul mustaqarra and al-hayatul musta'ara. So you have life which is established life, and which they call borrowed life. It's an interesting term, but it's artificial life. It's not real life. So that does not necessitate a janaza. So the Maliki madhab would say that if they cry, according to, that's the general understanding. I believe in similar terms with the Hanafi madhab as well, except the Hanafi madhab would say, my understanding, if I recall correctly, that as long as you could prove the child was born alive, then that's enough for a janaza, even if you don't cry. The Hanbalis are the ones that say that even if the child was just born, unfortunately, if it was a stillbirth, or even if there was an abortion or a miscarriage beyond 4 months, they allow a kind of a burial and a janaza and stuff like this. But the other madhabs don't generally say that, and it's definitely not a janaza for like a miscarriage. And they would consider this right at the end of although it's an actual birth, but it's a stillbirth. Have you ever watched Sheikh Ahmad Deedat debates? What do you think? I know you're not fond of pamphleteering. I love Ahmad Deedat. Okay, I totally love Ahmad Deedat. I watched many of his debates in my teens. When I had started, when I was about 16, 17, when I started to take the deen a bit seriously, I watched a lot of Ahmad Deedat videos. I think he was an amazing person. May Allah have mercy on him and grant him the best of the akhirah. I think he served an incredible function and purpose for his time. I don't think that time, I think that time has now passed. So we today Christianity is not the threat. You know, I get people, I don't know about in America, in the deep south, but in the UK and Europe, Christianity is outdated now. So when people start saying, oh, you know, I'm going to set up a debate between a Christian and a Muslim, this is so out of date. Christianity is not a threat to Islam anymore, right? So the point is that today things like apathy to religion are actually questioning inconsistencies within religion. This is what's become more at the forefront. Atheism, agnosticism, these things are the threat today to religion. It's not institutionalization of religion, not Christianity. But in his time it was, and I think he did an incredible job. And I have nothing but love, immense love for him, mashallah. And he had a great sense of humor in some of his videos. Very aggressive. Had an aggressive style, I gotta say. So the thing is, Is getting a mortgage haram? I don't believe getting a mortgage is haram. I have answered that in much detail in a previous Q&A. I don't want to go through all of that again. I don't believe that the riba of jahiliyyah that has been made haram previously applies to mortgages. I believe the riba of jahiliyyah is the closest kind of parable we have to, the closest kind of paradigm we have to it is like a loan shark. A kind of like a backstreet loan shark. Not banks and things like this. So I don't think it's the same thing, and I do believe mortgages are permissible. I've given an in-depth understanding. You can watch that there. This obviously won't do justice, but I do explain that nobody has consistency on riba. Nobody. And there's a lot of kind of holes in everybody's arguments. And despite what they'd like you to believe, that the arguments are clear, they're not. And I begin with the verse of the Quran to show that, beginning with the verse Ahallallahu al-bay' wa harrama al-riba, that the alif lam in the first al-bay' was lil jins, but or lil istighraq, that Ahallallahu al-bay', either al-bay' bi jami'i ajnasihi, or Ahallallahu kull al-bay', that Allah made all of this halal. But when it came to riba, it's not lil istighraq, and it's not lil jins, it's lil ahd al-dhihni. It's talking about the riba that they are aware of in their mind. And so Asim Mahmood says mortgages are halal, knocking one out is halal. What next? I didn't really think that you would associate the two. I never really thought about mortgages in that light. But you, nutty. Well, whatever floats your boat, mate, whatever floats your boat. So the thing is, right, so in the su'al, na'am. Right, so what is your opinion on missing Jum'ah Salah more than 3 times based on a hadith that is always quoted, especially in living in the West with work, etc.? You see, first of all, if you work, I don't believe that you have to attend Jum'ah. If you can't attend Jum'ah, you do not. It is not an obligation in that sense. If you can make it, alhamdulillah. If you can't, you can't. That's fine. You can just pray Dhuhr. So you don't need to kind of sacrifice your job to go pray Jum'ah. Okay, in my understanding, I am kind of more, I don't know, more sympathetic to the view that Jum'ah was initially constructed or brought about for a Muslim society that lives as a Muslim society, and it had a political purpose to it. I am definitely inclined to that understanding. I do feel that it was multifaceted, so it had the ritual side to it, the worship element, it had a social element, it brings people together, but it had a political strand as well, which is undeniable. So, for example, historically, right throughout Muslim history, you couldn't just make a mosque for Jum'ah. Okay, I just want you to be aware of that. You couldn't say, like if somebody said, like let's say here's the hadith, Man bana lillahi baytan, or masjidan bana lillahu baytan fil jannah, whoever made a house for Allah, or a masjid for Allah, Allah made a house for him in Jannah. So I read this hadith, you read this hadith, Maj, techie, people, newly married, alright. So the thing is, right, so let's say I'll pick on Maj, right? So let's say Maj reads that hadith and says, I want to build a masjid. So he says, alright, great, you can build a masjid. That's awesome. You can build a masjid. Nobody's going to stop you from building a masjid. But you say, I'm going to build a masjid which is going to have Jummah in it. You're being naughty. Because you will have people, the governor, who will personally pay you a little visit with his henchmen, and they would literally, they would knock that building down. Or you would not allowed ever, in Islamic history, ever, to build a mosque that could hold Jum'ah unless it was built by the governance and by the state, or authorized and sanctioned by the state, and it had to be on a register. You could never lead a Jum'ah ever by just saying, hey, I know, let's lead Jum'ah today, hey. You would actually be imprisoned or beaten up for that. I mean, you would actually pick any of the greatest imams that come to your name, whose names come to your mind. Imam Malik, Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Shafi'i, Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, Imam Bukhari, Imam Muslim. Pick some of the greatest names you can think of. None of them hardly probably ever led a Jum'ah in their entire lifetimes. Ever. None of them led a Jum'ah. Imam Malik was the alim of Medina. Did he ever lead Jum'ah? No. He never even used to lead the Salah in Medina. He never used to lead the Salah. Imam Abu Hanifa, you think he led Jum'ah? Hell no. He didn't lead Jum'ah. Jum'ah was never, the scholars never led Jum'ah like that. Jum'ah had a very political function to it. It was only a person who was, usually it was the governor. So it was like today, you know, if it was a Muslim country, you'd get whoever is the governor of that place would come and lead Jum'ah and give the khutbah. If you tried to sit there and do it, that was considered, that was tantamount to borderline treason. That's how serious that would have been seen. That if you tried to climb the minbar and lead Jum'ah, it would be seen as this is a covert coup d'etat movement, that you are trying to take over. And you would have been thoroughly punished. And they would have made an example out of you. And this is throughout our entire Islamic history. So, yeah, so you'd have somebody like Nawaz Sharif today. You know, I watched this clip that they took the Bollywood movie Rais and Shah Rukh Khan's, and they put the clips there, so it's Nawaz Sharif and Imran Khan. Ah, it was hilarious. They've got their faces and everything at the Alright, so the thing, anyway, there was, why is riba haram? I believe riba is haram because of the kind of extortion that it led to, and it wasn't just extortion, it was a kind of, it was the tyranny of extortion that it had. It was, and I'll tell you something here, people, that look, even now, you know, when you look at things like suicides, yeah, there, a friend of ours, he should be live, Momo, there was a friend of his who in Birmingham had killed himself recently, and we were kind of discussing this. I mean, I don't think he was Muslim, but we were just talking about, whoa, like the whole thing about suicide and everything. Abu Khadija, just sorry, I'll come back to this, said, yeah, but in the first 3 generations, who led the Jum'ah? The first 3 generations, what do you mean, who led the Jum'ah? In the first 3 generations, who do you think? Imam Malik wasn't part of those generations? Imam Malik is the Atba'u Tabi'een. He's from the students of the Sahabah. So, yes, and Imam Malik did not lead the Jum'ah. Neither did anybody who was not the governor ever lead Jum'ah, ever. So, that does not apply. I don't mean like now, today, because today everything's different, but I mean throughout Islamic history. So even in, let's say in Umar's time, radiallahu anh, he would lead it because he is the ruler, radiallahu anh, and other governors would lead it. You wouldn't get, just because you're pious, you wouldn't get to lead Jum'ah, or just because you're Imam Bukhari, you've mastered all the Hadith, you couldn't lead Jum'ah. It would have been a serious, I don't think people understand how serious of a violation it would have been. It would have been considered really dangerous, like you'd be crazy to do it. It'd be as tantamount as to like running up to Buckingham Palace holding a gun. It would be like that stupid, that you will be in serious trouble. And there's no... Anyway, so this thing, about suicide, coming back to that. So we were talking about this, and it's interesting that, you see, people, one of the key reasons why people commit suicide, and this has got, I'm not saying this was not the reason why that person committed it necessarily. I don't know what his reasons were, but that just got us talking about the topic. Right. You would think if your life was, for example, if your life was really, like, let's say you were getting beaten up or tortured, you would think that, or if a person was in a war zone, that they would be prepared to kill themselves. But ironically, the survival instinct would kick in, and you would actually want to survive. Hence, most people in war zones do not kill themselves. They actually survive. But one of the things that does actually kill people, leads them to suicide, is debt. Financial debt. And it's actually one of the key kind of things. I mean, there's other factors as well. I'm not saying people haven't killed themselves over other reasons. But this is actually something that you are actually much more likely to commit suicide over, rather than being in a war zone. But you would imagine that maybe the person in the war zone who's lost everything would probably be more likely, but is actually not, statistically speaking. Now, but you see, so the thing is that this riba is, that's what it would do. It would make people want to just be dead. And so somebody could ask, well, what about a mortgage? Why is a mortgage different? Well, a mortgage is massively different because there's so many safety nets. Okay, when you operate within a greater framework, a legal framework. So, for example, when you guys go, when I go to my local shop here and I buy something, there's the conditions that me and the shopkeeper have there and then. So, for example, the shopkeeper may say, oh, I want you to check your products before you leave. So, for example, imagine the shopkeeper says, you're not entitled to a refund. But we are actually buying and selling within a greater framework, which allows for refunds if my rights have been compromised under the Consumer kind of Act. So, although people wouldn't make a big deal of small things, like they wouldn't really take it to court and stuff, but meaning that we still, so one is your immediate transaction, but there's a greater level of kind of, there's a framework within which you're operating, which both of you are still bound by, even if you know it or don't know it. So when you're with a bank, it's the same thing. There is a greater framework. So for example, they could not, you wouldn't be destroyed in the way at all. There's a lot of safety networks. In fact, banks are under obligation to kind of allow concessionary kind of parameters where people are struggling financially, which normal rent-paying landlords are not. So for example, if I was struggling, let's say if I was struggling with my rent and I was struggling with my mortgage, the bank would actually have an obligation to work with me, whereas the landlord wouldn't. The landlord could have me evicted in 2 months. Whereas the bank, you're actually safer, because if the bank tried to take me to court, the courts would just rule that they take a concessionary payment until I can afford the other payments. And most likely the banks wouldn't chuck you out anyway within a few months. I mean, you could go up to 6 months to a year on a concessionary payment scheme. I mean, you'd have to pay things back, but you wouldn't have that safety with a private landlord, for example. So, secondly, if you totally can't pay, and let's say you know the bank said, okay, I'm gonna, there's gonna be a foreclosure, they're gonna take the property. I mean, you could declare bankruptcy. It's not actually, I mean, I'm not here trying to offer you guys advice, but I'm trying to tell you that there are safety nets, right? You are not actually, it's not like a private, imagine there was a person now who said, like a street, loan shark, who you borrowed £500 from, and for £500 he wants now he wants £10,000 from you. Like, imagine that. Now you're so desperate that you borrow it. Now he comes round, threatens you, threatens your family, bullies you, intimidates you, shadows you, starts snatching your things, starts compounding, adding the evidence, stuff like this. Adding the interest, stuff like that. So you can imagine that's what was going on in Riba al-Jahiliyyah when Allah declared war on those people. It was because these people wished they were dead. That's why. Okay, so right. Recent documentary about the Halalah marriage. Thank you, Abu Talib, for bringing this up. Is organizing a Halalah marriage so the wife can go back to her ex-husband legit, as it seems like prostitution. Okay. Thank you for bringing this up, because I wanted to answer this and I'd forgotten. And right. Right, so the thing is, Abida they had just said private landlords are, because it's a commercial market, corporate market, and the state works to protect the rights of businesses. Right, so it promotes businesses over and it protects their rights. So whereas a bank, although it's a business, but it's catering to the masses, and that's seen as a kind of a commercial interaction. So it's different. Anyway, coming back to this, right? Halala, as it's commonly known in Urdu, or tahleel, as they call in Arabic. Tahleel can also mean analysis, right? So just, whoa, ease up there. If somebody says, guys, I just want to perform a little tahleel with you, then you're like, whoa. Or you turn up in the bathrobe and the other person's got all their books open. So tahleel in Arabic can mean analysis. Okay, so just to kind of clarify that. Now, the thing is, well, what this means is making something halal. Allah says in the Quran about talaq, that at-talaq marratan, that talaq is twice, فَإِمْسَاكٌ بِمَعْرُوفٍ وَتَصْرِيحٌ بِإِحْسَانٍ, and so on and so forth. But then Allah says that you can do this, and then you can do this talaq, and then فَإِن طَلَّقَهَا مِن بَعْدٍ, then if he divorced her for a final time, فَلَا تَحِلُّ لَهُ حَتَّى تَنْكِحَ زَوْجًا غَيْرًا, then she is not halal for him unless a future marriage of hers was to go to ruins. Okay, now this is really interesting, because, right, so what happens now is, let me tell you what's happening now, tell you the rulings, then come back to this. And I think we might have to just kind of wrap up with this, really, because right, I can see a lot of questions coming in, but this really demands some attention. Okay, so what's happening right now? What's happening is people are giving 3 talaqs. So guys are getting angry, right? So they're like, why is the tea cold? Woman, talaq, talaq, talaq. And then they're like, oh my God, what have I done? I gave you talaq 3 times. Right, so now what do we do? So this is what's actually happening is, and I hope it's not happening, but it is in some places. They're saying, well, the only way I can get married to you now is because Allah says if you divorced her for the 3 times, because the majority of the schools, the majority of the madhabs, have believed that 3 talaqs given in one go count as 3. Right, so the thing is, they count as 3 talaqs. So therefore, it's brought you straight up to speed with this final verse, saying, وَإِن طَلَّقَهَا مِن بَعْدٍ, and if he divorces her after that, فَلَا تَحِلُّ لَهُ, then she's not halal for him. So he's like, uh-oh, now I'm stuck. So they say, well, Allah says, unless another marriage of hers broke down, so let's engineer this marriage. So, and according to the Hadith as well, it has to be a proper marriage. So meaning, and a proper marriage was very clear that what you get married for. Most people, one of the fundamental things is intimacy, sexual intercourse. So there must be sexual intercourse. Okay, so So what some people unfortunately have been doing, nutty, they've been saying, okay, we can arrange a Halalah to take place. So you bring your wife here, so she comes along, we read a quick nikah, right? Qabiltu, I accept. Do you accept? You accept? You accept too? Right? And so what they do is they now go for they say, okay, shall we now shall we spend some time alone, you know, get to know each other in this little time that we have. So they now go off wherever it is, and as you can imagine, nutty stuff, they have to obviously it's all serious, of course. We must now consummate the marriage. Woman, follow after me. Okay, now one must disrobe. So the thing is, look, so this is so what happens is what you're aware of. They go, they have sexual intercourse, then this new husband, he then divorces her and says, okay, I now pronounce divorce. Talaq, talaq, talaq. She says, oh well, thank you Pati Dev for this, or my part-time Pati Dev. Now I'm going to go back to my first Pati Dev waiting for me outside. So the other husband will probably now be there, or she will now go home, and they will now redo a new nikah, and obviously they'll have to wait for the iddah, the 3 months or whatever, and then things are just normal. Except, like hell will they be normal. I mean, how could that be normal anyway? I mean, I don't know. I mean, because it's so. But anyway, so this is what happens with this Halalah thing. So the madhabs have said 3 talaqs, generally speaking, 3 talaqs. All have had some differences on this, by the way. That 3 talaqs are 3 if it's happened. And there's been a minority position in all schools of law saying that, look, no, actually, if they were in one context, they only count as 1. But anyway, as a result of this ruling, this is what's happened. And now these women are sleeping with other men, obviously then going back to their husband. And as you can imagine, it's not going to be very... And most of these guys, you have to remember, are going to be incredibly insecure anyway. So they're going to be like, so... So it's going to be like, are you still thinking about him? God, but can you imagine the job of that guy though? Imagine he's a professional, like muhallil, like I'm a professional. He's like, excuse me, I take pride in my work. Right, so it's like, excuse me, can you make an appointment online, please? Because you know I only do things professionally, right? So can you imagine what his job must be like? It's like, boy, I've had a stressful week at work. Can you imagine his family don't know what he does? So he has to come home and go, it's been a crazy day at work. So the thing is, anyway, right, now the point is, and by the way, and so some places, I remember hearing that some places they say, oh, they're like, oh, can it be like this really, like a really weak man? Can it be like a really weak, kind of like a, oh, like, you know, you look, I'm really skinny, or can it be like an old kind of frail man? Because, you know, you don't want like some strong guy. Imagine like a really manly man comes out, like, it's like, It's like, you know, holding a cigar. It's like, you alright, bro? Boy, things would be incredibly awkward after that. But the point is, so I've actually heard where they've said, oh, can it be like a, you know, they've wanted like really weak, like a weak, frail men, or like just borderline, you know, like guys in their late teens or that are still not matured properly. They want something like. But anyway, so what is the ruling on all of this? The ruling on this, strangely enough, most of the madhabs have actually considered this, if engineered, to be haram. The Hanafi madhab did say that, you see, now this is the thing, the Hanafi madhab had some leeway in saying that, well, if the husband wasn't in on it, so if if a friend, hello friend, if a friend did this, set this up with the wife, the ex-wife, just to help that husband get back together with his wife, then it's actually a good thing. So they actually say this, but they say if he did it without plotting it with the husband. So if he did, if I was just feeling friendly, that, hey friend, are you in need of a friend? So I see you've divorced your wife. I see you're quite upset. Well, I want you to know I'm a friend. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be contacting your wife. So the thing is that so in the Hanafi madhab they have this ruling that if the husband did this, if the new husband, the friend husband, right, did this to help his friend or help this person without plotting, without the husband, the first husband, being in on it, on not engineering it with them, then it could actually be a rewardable act. Rewardable I can understand, but religiously rewardable I'm struggling with. Okay, so the thing is, now you'll be surprised. See, Hamza's saying what kind of men would allow a halalah, but you'll be surprised because this is where religion gets twisted, you see, because they want, you see, they've got kids, they're too embarrassed to divorce, and they can't live with each other because they've been taught through so much guilt that this is haram, 3 talaqs, zina, you're going to get, everything is impure, you're going to be like this, you're going to be like, so because they tell them all this talk, the scholars do, they get petrified, and they just think, you know what, just do it. Just do it. So the thing is, okay, now that was the backdrop, people. Now I'm going to reevaluate all of this. Okay, so with you. Now, first of all, I'm going to say that in line with most of the madhabs, that what goes on is, I was going to say bang out of order. It's just utterly out of order, right? So the thing is, this is unacceptable. Slick Mo, hearing all of this, says, bro, why have you got a chain on? Slick! There's a man with his priorities in place. He's hearing of all this calamity, all these issues, and he goes, bro, why have you got a chain on? I like that guy already. He knows, he's focused. Right, so the thing is, anyway, now, right, coming back to this, I believe that this is utterly unacceptable. It leads obviously it leads to not only a ridiculous future for the couple, for the intended couple, not the halalah, not the muhallil, and the wife, momentary wife, but the actual first husband. it leads to a ridiculous future for them anyway. It's a misery and a humiliation for the woman, right? But it also ridicules Islam, right, which is utterly unacceptable. So the thing is, because when we're speaking on behalf of Islam, we're speaking on behalf of Allah and His Messenger. And that's something that we don't have, we don't have a right to do. Okay, not in this kind of manner. So I would say, not only would I say that we act upon this minority position, which is that in any like if any number of talaqs were given in one gathering, that they only constitute one. Not only would I say that, and that was the fatwa given by some ulama, they may be a minority, but within all madhabs. So within the Maliki madhab, the recent legendary great mufassir and grand mufti of the Malikiyah, Ibn Ashur, his fatwa was that 3 equal 1, that we can take this fatwa for talaq wherever necessary. Before, historically, scholars within the Maliki madhab like Ibn Abd as-Salam, many of the fuqaha of Qurtuba, of Cordova, Muslim Spain, they all said that, right? That and so I'm just giving you these opinions here first, right? The other madhabs as well, Ibn Maqatil from the Hanafi madhab, Abdul Hayy al-Laknawi said, look, if there's a custom, you can resort to it. Stuff like this, and other madhabs as well, and other people have said this. That's the first thing. I'm going to say that no matter what the circumstance, no matter what, you must, I feel we are under obligation to find a kind of reparation and salvage that nikah if the couple have a strong resolve to salvage their relationship. Then the scholar is duty bound, in my understanding, to find a way to make it happen. And I believe that, right, that is what Allah has ordained upon the people of knowledge. So if He gave 3 talaqs in one go, then you take that fatwa if they both want to be together. But you can ask them both. If they both say, no, we definitely want to be together, because people don't know about the rulings of Islam. They don't know about the rulings of talaq anymore. They don't understand these things. So we have to make ease for them. If they've given it on separate situations, then find a different dispensation, God damn it. Okay? You find a different fatwa. If they say, I gave it on different things, look, but one of the times she happened to be on a menstrual cycle, then you take that Hanbali fatwa that says that on a menstrual cycle a talaq is invalid, and you apply that. If they say, well, no, it wasn't even that, I did it in a different time, but I was angry, then you take the fatwa of Ibn al-Qayyim and you say, well, okay, then based on that. Look, if the couple have a strong resolve to get back together, you have a duty as a scholar to allow and facilitate that union. This is an obligation upon the people of knowledge. So, especially when the knowledge of Islam is so scarce that people don't have that kind of knowledge of Islam. They don't know the ahkam, they don't know these rulings. Now, why am I saying this? Why am I saying this? Let's go back to the origin. I want to go to the etiology of this problem. Where did this whole musibah, this calamity stem from? Let's take an etiological look, people. Okay, let's go right back to the origin. The origin was that, you see, in early Islam and in the Jahiliyyah time, people would marry and they would divorce. So a husband would divorce his wife and he would say, oh, talaq, I'll give you talaq. So fine, she's divorced. Now she would sit in iddah. So she would have this waiting period of 3 menstrual cycles, let's say. Now, she would wait her iddah, but before the iddah finishes, so let's say she's got it's going to take her, let's just say it's going to take her 3 months. Okay. Now, 3 menstrual cycles don't mean 3 months, but let's just say that for simplicity purposes. Now, when she's close to the final one finishing, he would say, oh, I've taken you back. I've done ruju'. Because a husband can revoke any talaq he issues. This is what the Sharia teaches. So he would take her back. So she would now say, oh, okay. Now, the moment he's taken her back, the next day he would say, oh, I'll give you talaq again. So now she would wait another 2-3 months. When she's towards the end of the cycle, he would say, you know, I've taken you back. And he would go like this for 2-3 years maybe. He would have other women, other wives, but this one he would torture her. So she wasn't a free woman. She couldn't go and just marry somebody else. And she wasn't like a wife with him either. So this was unquestionably, I mean undoubtedly, this was dhulm. It was oppression. And Allah condemns this strongly in the Quran. And He says, وَلَا تَذَرُوهَا كَالْمُعَلَّقَةِ, that don't dare like leave the woman in that suspended state. As a woman who is suspended. That either marry her or let her go. Imsakum bima'ruf or tasrihum bi ihsan. You either live together kindly or you part ways gracefully. That's how Allah sets the balance. So what happened to safeguard the woman? To safeguard the woman, Allah said, okay, now if he does it a third time, khalas, you don't have any more talaqs to issue. But the question here was, you see, a husband might just do this. He might say, no problem. Because she's vulnerable, when I divorce her the third time, I'll just say to her, hey, listen, you know what, I got a bit carried away. Sorry, I've been thinking about it. Let's just do another nikah. And then she'll probably say, okay, because she'll be on the rebound, let's say, and she'll be vulnerable as well in this scenario. Now, the moment he does the nikah, he does the same thing again. Says, I divorce you again. And now, the same thing. So how do you stop this? So Allah says that to safeguard the woman, He said, look, if you divorce her the third time, it's over. And I tell you what, she can't even marry you again. No. She can only marry somebody else. But okay, in the future, should that relationship break down, she can come back to you. Should she choose to. And Allah uses the verse. Look at the verse. He doesn't say until she is married off. Hatta tankiha. Muhammad, Sheikh, everybody, Sheikh Sidi Iqbal, ahlan wa sahlan. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikhana. At one of the leading and legendary ulama of the UK, an absolute ocean in the Maliki Madhab people. If you're not following Sheikh Muhammad Sidi Iqbal, then do so, right? So there he is on Facebook, Sheikh, right? So the thing is now, this thing, right? So to safeguard the woman, Allah is saying, you know what? She cannot marry him again. And the verb Allah uses is tankih. For her, she is the active agent until she marries a husband. Not she's married off. Not that somebody marries her to this. She marries. Hatta tankiha zawjan ghayra. That she marries a different. So this is her choice. Willfully. Her volition. She is embarking on a relationship. Yeah, if that broke down, right? If they, in arada islahan, if the two want to get back together and she wants to marry this husband again, she can. The first one. She marries. Look at this. She is the active agent. So this whole thing was done to safeguard the woman. Because it's the end of game now. It's like you can't really, it kind of kills the game. Because the husband that was kind of treating her like this toy, saying, oh, you're divorced, I'll take you back, you're divorced, I'll take you back. Well, she's gone now. You can't marry her anyway. Islam has stopped it. She's gone with another person. Now, you're not going to do that anyway, and you're not going to have that interest. So, this is what these verses of the Quran came down for. Okay, this is what they were revealed over. Right, this is what they were all about. What's happened is over time, the backlash, unfortunately, maybe not as, obviously that was immense torture that was happening initially, but what's happened is the backlash, the kind of reactionary result, became similarly humiliating for the woman. So, you know, so it went from trying to safeguard the woman, and it landed in a way that it still ended up humiliating the woman. Now, this was not happening like this in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, by the way. So in the time of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, this was not happening like this. But it starts gradually later, a few cases, and then as Muslim civilization develops, this becomes obviously a thing, because Muslims there becomes this culture of talaq. I'll give you talaq, I'll give you talaq. If you do this, talaq. If you do this, talaq. This becomes a whole, and this is something, it's silly, it's petty, right? It's ridiculous. The books of talaq, the book of talaq is the second largest book within the book of Sharia, after Kitab al-Salah. It's Kitab al-Talaq. It's massive. A huge chunk of that is all about people making oaths of talaq. Oh, if this happens, I'll give you talaq. If that happens, I'll give you talaq. People don't need to speak like that. This kind of thing is nonsense. And so what I would advise, as I've said before, that look, Islam is all about welfare, it's all about maslahah, it's all about preserving and safeguarding. Right? The ulama, somebody said there, maybe this was a punishment. Somebody said, maybe, whilst I was speaking, somebody had commented that maybe this was a punishment. Punishment for who? Punishment for the guy? What, like saying, oh, you said talaq. Look, I absolutely condemn people using this kind of language as a threat. Saying to people, like, if a husband says to his wife, oh, I'm going to give you talaq, 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 I'm going to give you talaq, I'm going to give you that. That's just a child. Okay. Yes, I mean, talaq is there. If the relationship is broken, it's broken. But what I'm trying to say is that people who use this, that's unacceptable to start off with. Secondly, if he does use it, more than anything, he's in need of education. Yes, if the woman does not want to go back to him, then you do not need to kind of provide certain fatwa, because the woman is just glad the relationship's over. But if both couple have a strong resolve to get back together, then the woman shouldn't be further penalized and humiliated as a consequence of the husband not being able to, acting like an idiot. So husband says talaq, talaq, talaq. Now she has to go and spend a night with another guy to pay for him. I mean, that's ridiculous. That's absurd by any measure. So as I said, that look, if the couple have a strong, first of all, people shouldn't use these kind of talaq terms in that way. Secondly, if it does happen, then and both couple have a strong resolve to get back together, then I believe that Maulana Mabs, ahlan wa sahlan, then I believe that the shuyukh, that the ulama, especially in our day and age, have an obligation and are duty bound to find for the couple any ruling that will allow them and facilitate this union. Okay, because the whole thing is about trying to, if a family want to stay together, then Islam wants them to stay together. Okay, that's all I can say. Islam is not about breaking homes. It is about making homes. But if it's a different scenario, if a relationship has broken down. If a relationship has broken down, then Islam is not going to impose an artificiality of a home. But where a family wish to stay together, it is absurd to claim that Allah wants them to be apart. That, let no man cleft them asunder, as it says. So the thing is that this has kind of brought a lot of disrepute unfortunately, onto Islam. I still, I mean, there's been that whole, right now it's been in the news and everything, this whole thing. So, yes, Allah, may Allah make things easy for people who are going through such circumstances as well. But we really do need a lot more education out there. Right, people, I've gone on for way too long. I'm surprised some of you have hacked it. Right, I'm going to leave you to it, inshallah. Once again, if you are on Facebook and you've not added me before or followed me, then do so. I'm on Twitter as well, same handle, Mufti Abu Layth. On Snapchat as Malm2014, that's MALM 2014. You can add me, shoot me your questions, inshallah. I do try to respond as much as I can, although right now my voice notes on Facebook Messenger are playing up for some reason, but I do try to respond, inshallah. Other than that, shukran, barakallahu feekum for all your encouragement and support. Right, so that's it. Anything else? Reach out to me, people. Take very good care of yourselves. Till next week, remember me in your kind du'as. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.